have faith in God is not a stagnant state. It's a journey. As a believer, we should grow in our knowledge of God and His Word. Walk with Alan Cutting and many other believers as together we walk the believer's journey.
Aloha, and welcome to the Believer's Journey. I want to thank you for joining us today. I want to thank you for your participation in praying for our ministry, for watching us, for sharing our videos. I want to thank our sponsors, Guerrero CPA and Allison and Thompson Insurance, and as well as Trade Show Displays. If any of you happen to need a CPA or insurance or some kind of promotion, go to my website and you can click on the links and get to one of those people that sponsor our ministry. Today we have a really neat program. I'm going to do something very different today. Normally we have a half an hour that we promote a ministry, promote the minister or missionary, and then we go into a topic. And today we're just basically going to work with a topic all the way through the hour. We're going to talk about healing. We're going to talk about faith. We're going to talk about the power of God. My guest today, his name is Marcus Borgus Jr. Okay, and he is here. He's going to tell his story. I brought along with him his dad. Why, I don't know, but I figured he'd be a good input here and there. And Marcus has an amazing story. He was in college. He was just finished his fourth year. I guess you were in Tennessee.
Yeah.
And it was a music major?
Yeah, I was a music major. I was at Lee University in Cleveland, Tennessee.
So, and I've just met Marcus Jr. I've just met him. I've known his dad for 3.5 years now.
Yeah.
Wow.
Time flies.
And so anyway, when I read Marcus Jr., I guess you're both Marcuses.
Yeah.
So, do they call you Junior at home?
No.
Good.
We have a Spanish name for me.
Oh, okay.
So, when you want to refer to something as little, you put ito at the end.
Okay.
So my dad is Marcos, then I'm Marquito.
Okay. All right. And your mom probably does that a
Yeah.
lot. I've been around Spanish homes a lot,
Exactly.
mixed homes, and that's exactly
That's how it works. Yeah.
Yeah. So you had something happen to you that put you in the hospital that basically put you in a position that even your parents didn't know if you were going to live. But I want you to tell us what happened, and from your perspective.
So starting from the beginning, it was like a normal day, summer day. It was July 18th, so it was a summer Sunday. I didn't go to church because I didn't have to play drums, so I just didn't go. So I got up, and what I did first was a little like morning workout stretch thing that I like doing. So I was doing that. I was doing push-ups, pull-ups, jumping jacks, and then all of a sudden, I just felt a little like a snap, like that happened in the back of my head, and so it felt like a little headache. It was starting to happen. So I was like, okay, let me stop, let me get some water, and we'll just see how I feel. So I went downstairs, and it was not getting better. So at that time, I started to panic a little bit. It's like, oh, it's not getting better. What do I do? And it was summer, so no one was home. I was by myself. My roommates, one was in like Washington. He likes climbing, so he was climbing. And another friend was in California. He's a math major, so he was doing more math stuff. So I was by myself, but luckily I had friends next door, so I went over there and I called him down, and I just collapsed at his house or on his couch, and I fell over. I just started feeling numb, started feeling like I was losing balance. Well, that's why I fell over, because I was like, I can't stand anymore. Then I started like shaking, not really shaking, like getting numb in my hands, my legs. the light was getting really getting too much for me, and sound. It was very weird. Everything started getting muffled. So I wasn't really deaf, but everything was coming like all the words everyone was saying. So I didn't know who else was there. All I know was there were more people. And a funny story I like saying was, I didn't find this out till later, but I knew then, was one of my counselors later, once I got out of the hospital, she told me the symptoms of AVM, and one of them is projectile vomit. And so I didn't know that, but I found that out when I was on the couch, because I drank some water and I did not have it anymore. And it was on the floor.
So AVM is arteriovenous malfunction, correct?
Or malformation.
Malformation, and that's when the
That's when
veins in the back.
Yeah, veins. It can happen anywhere. It's just when veins from birth, instead of connecting like normally, they just connect bad, and there's a big clump.
Okay.
So whenever there's pressure, they'll burst. So that's what happened to my head. So working out, obviously that creates pressure in your head, and so that was enough pressure to make it burst.
So eventually you ended up in the hospital. Now, were you at all unconscious? How did that, where were you at that point?
So I blacked out first while I was in the on the couch. So I just blacked out. My friends, I know this because I woke up. They tried to put me in their car to drive me to the hospital, but I woke up and I've noticed that they were doing that. And I was really dazed at that point, so I couldn't do anything, couldn't say anything. It was very quick. I just knew they couldn't carry me, and then after that I was like, I fell back into coma or blackout. And then they say they took me to the local hospital, but they didn't have enough of the right equipment for me. So then they took me to Knoxville.
So let me interject, because this is where, in between that, we're coming out of church on a Sunday, July 18th, and we get a call via Messenger, Facebook Messenger, that we usually don't receive. So my wife receives it from a stranger, and she says, your son is in the ambulance. He's non-responsive, and they're going to take him to the hospital. So we're coming out of church, great service. You're gonna go home and or go to eat somewhere, and we get this call, and so we don't. All we have is questions. What do you mean? Where's the ambulance? Who are you? What do you mean, my son? Can I talk to the EMS? And so we finally were able to speak to the EMS person, and she didn't have many answers either. She told us she treated him for an overdose, because college student, unresponsive. So they figured, okay, he tried some drugs and he overdosed, and so they gave him the overdose treatment. He did not respond to it, and I was like, of course he didn't, And so I was like, okay, good, he's not on drugs, but but he didn't respond, and actually at that point they had put a tube to help him breathe, because he was not breathing on his own by that time.
Okay.
And they were taking him to the local hospital. Lee University is in Cleveland, Tennessee, and it's a small town. So they were not able to treat him there. They took X-rays. They were able to see enough that they could not treat him. And this, while this is happening, we're trying to get to Cleveland. And on a Sunday afternoon, about 1 o'clock, it's pretty hard to get to Cleveland, Tennessee. From one small town airport to a smaller town, which doesn't even have an airport. Cleveland doesn't have. And so it took us it took us all day. Actually, we got to Tennessee the next day at 3 o'clock in the morning, and by that time, they had transferred him to University of Tennessee, and that's when we found him there.
So, how long were you out?
No one tells me.
So let me continue then. So we got there. It was about 3 o'clock in the morning on Monday when we finally arrived to now Knoxville. Right, it was Knoxville, and we were able to talk to the surgeon because they had to emergency procedures on him, and so they were able to stop the bleeding. Seal the veins that were bleeding, and then they also had to remove a piece of skull, I guess to make room for the swelling. You know, so what I was told was that a kind of a golf ball size piece was removed, because when you're young, when you're this young, your brain is still as large as it is. The older you get, the more your brain kind of shrinks. And so when elderly people have a stroke, there's room in their skull for swelling. But when you're 21, there's not much room. And they were definitely expecting swelling.
So, the AVM, it kind of mimics a stroke, or is it like having a stroke?
Yeah, it's kind of like it. It's not the same thing. That's why you don't call it that. Because a stroke is when it's a clogged artery, but it's not really. Nothing was clogged. It was pressure based. So that's what makes it different. But since they're both bleeding of the brain,
Right.
they kind of have the same effect. So, like it happened in the back of my head to the right. So the parts that are in the back of my head to the right are what the controls, like my occipital lobe is my eyes. So it affected my eyesight to where I didn't go blind, but my eyes they went in. So I don't know how to say it. Like, look at it. Like, I just went in. So I was not like, it was weird. It felt like I was looking straight, but my eyes were in. And so
his eyes did not have all the motion he had before. So if he tried to look to one side, the eye would bounce. And then we tried to look to the other side, the eye would bounce. And when you're looking at him, you could tell something was wrong. It looked like he was looking past you. So that was one of the things that was affected. His speech was affected.
Oh yeah.
Right? Your vocal cords were affected.
Yeah, so that's why they said I stopped doing involuntary things like that my brain just does. Like breathing, for instance. It's because what controls that is the brain stem. And so the bleeding hit a little bit. So like if it did any more, it probably would have just killed me like that. But it did a little bit, so it stopped me from breathing. So when I woke up, the hardest things to do were breathing, and it also affected my everything, my muscles on my left side, because it was my right part of my brain. So one of the things that collapsed was my left vocal cord. So that means I could not talk at all. And it was not paralyzed. My body didn't become paralyzed. It just became very weak. So with that part of my vocal cord, it just took a lot of time. It took, I think, 3 weeks.
Yeah.
So, now if you didn't get to the hospital when you did, it's very possible you could have died. In
Yes.
fact, more than just possible, or
Yeah.
probable.
You know.
So that was the beginning of what we saw as miracles. When I tell the story, I talk about a series of things that had to happen before he would even have surgery. You know?
Yeah.
So the first miracle, thankfully, he got to his friend's apartment and his friend was there. When we spoke to his friend, forget his name,
Oh, Dakota.
Dakota, he says, "I'm almost never home. On Sundays, I like to be out.
I was scared. No, I was like, I know that. So when he came down, I was like,
Thank God he's home."
Yeah.
So was it painful?
Yeah.
What happened?
Yeah. Yeah, because it felt like a regular headache. So that's why I wasn't scared for like 2 minutes. But after that, I was like, it's not going away. Something must be wrong. So at that point, I started panicking. Like, I was like, oh my gosh, what do I do? Because no one's here. Who do I tell? I don't have. And then I was like, I don't have a lot of time. You know, I don't know why I was so dire, but I did. I was like, I don't have enough time.
Thank God you did.
So I was like, okay, maybe next door, they're there. So I tried next door, even though I know all three of them, Sunday, they don't like being home. So I just went, I was like, maybe they're there, let's just say. And so when I look, they liked even the door open, so I just opened the door. And no one was there in the living room, so I was like, dang it. I was like, hey, someone here. Because one of them is brothers of my roommate, so he left to go rock
Right.
climbing. Another one is, I don't know, I think he works, so he was working. And then Dakota just doesn't like being in the house. So I was very glad when I saw Dakota come out from his room.
So how long were you in the hospital?
It was not a week. I don't think it was a week.
No, we were in Tennessee, in UT, for at least 3 weeks,
Oh.
and
I
then
feel like I remember 3 weekends.
yeah,
So,
at least 3 because they said UT said their goal was to get him out of intensive care in 3 weeks, and that was their timeline, and so they were going to move him from intensive care to regular room in that timeline. So we did at least 3 weeks, and we may have done another week, but now outside of intensive care.
So let me ask you a question. So you're a preacher's kid, okay? I'm kind of an adopted preacher's kid, and I know how preacher's kids can be. I mean, there's a typical stereotype, right? You know, we get in trouble.
There is.
Okay, so were you one of these typical preacher's kids?
Oh, I wouldn't say that. I think I was very obedient and very, I guess, straight and narrow when it comes to it.
Yeah.
Because I don't know why, but that's who I am. I think like my personality is just I want to be okay with people.
Mhm.
I don't want people to get mad. That's always been my thing.
You don't want to get in trouble.
Yeah, and I don't want other people to get in trouble either.
Yeah.
So like, I don't want to be the reason why other people would get mad or do something wrong.
I'm married to that.
Yeah.
I mean, not only does she ever not want to get in trouble, she always tells me what I do so I won't continue to get in trouble. I'm like, it's okay. No, you'll get in trouble, but it's okay.
Yeah.
She's like a sheriff.
I feel like that too, but then nowadays with the culture now, you can't tell people what to do.
Yeah.
So I have a friend who is I'll say a struggling Christian, I
Mhm.
guess. And so we'll play video games almost every day. And he'll tell me his life and stuff he does. I'll be like, I'll think to myself, that's not right. You should be doing this. And I want to tell him, but he's younger than me. And so we know the culture. It's like, if I were to tell him, and I have, but he just bounces it off, and he laughs it off, or worse, he'll just criticize me. I'll be like, why?
Yeah.
Why do I even try?
So let's go to rehab, because in my understanding, people that go through something like this usually have a long or difficult rehab. Am I correct to guess that? So what was rehab like? What happened? How did you deal with that? Not only physically, but how did you deal with that emotionally?
I think it was like sometime in August when we went to rehab. Like, all I know is after my mom's birthday. So it must have been like about now. I went to rehab 2 years ago. And then we got out last week of September. It was 6 weeks, that's what it was. So we got there. I was very excited because I just wanted to not be in the hospital bed anymore. So I was like, what happened is that to transfer me to there. So we were in Knoxville, and the rehab was in Atlanta. So it's like if from here to Dallas, and like I was like this in the back of an ambulance. So I was like this the whole way. And the whole time I was like, wow. I was just thinking to myself, I don't know what I was thinking. I forgot. Oh, I think it was that the assistant was cute. That's it. That's all I was thinking about.
Typical male.
Yeah.
Typical male. Before we get into and continue with the rehab, I want to ask Senior a question. Now, in the story, by the way, if any of you want to read the story, it's really it's a one-page story. It's in the San Antonio Beacon. You can get it online, SA Beacon. It's really an amazing story. It's really good, and I recommend it. However, in the story, and when we talked the other day, you mentioned about a scripture, and you said like 1 Samuel 30. So I looked it up, and this doesn't make any sense. So I had to look it up, and back to the story, it's 20. Okay, so you were at a point where you didn't know whether your son was going to live or die.
That's right.
Okay. And you prayed, and you said this scripture came to you. Now, the scripture is 1 Samuel 20, and basically it says, and the Lord told him, we're talking about David, right? Yes, to go after them, and you will surely recover everything that was taken from you. And he believed this was God's way of saying yes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. But, so I'm the kind of guy that goes back and says, where does the scripture come from? So I'm going back to read it, and it's about Jonathan and David having to
You have the wrong chapter.
Really?
It is 30.
It is 30.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well,
I could.
Then go back.
I'm a preacher, so I could give it to you. So 1 Samuel chapter 30.
Okay.
Is David is in between, and he's living in Ziklag.
Okay.
And Ziklag is a place of transition for David, because he's no longer with Saul. Saul has rejected him, and he's not there any longer. But he's not yet king, which he's anointed to be. Mm-hmm. So he's in that middle place, in that place of transition. And he comes back from being rejected from the Philistines because they didn't want him to fight, because he was with the Israelis. He was a Jew. He was, so he got rejected now by Saul, his king, and then he got rejected by the Philistine warriors, and so he was in this bad place. He comes back home to Ziklag, and he finds the place burned down. Okay, so that's chapter 30. In that, there's a lot of pressure on him. This is where the Bible says, and David encouraged himself in the Lord. That's the kind of the popular verse of that chapter. And then he goes on and he tells the priest, bring me the ephod, and he brings him and he goes to before God. And David prays himself. He doesn't pray through a priest. He speaks to God himself. And he says in chapter 30, verse 8, he says in the New King James, which is more anointed to me.
I use it too.
He says, "Shall I pursue this troop? Shall I overtake them?" And how that fits in my story, in my prayer, because when we walked into that ICU room about 3 o'clock in the morning that Monday, and we see Marcus, and if you read the story, and I think maybe you took that picture, Marcus is tubed up and not breathing on his own, and that's a horrible image to see of your son that is athletic, that is a musician, that cannot sit still, and he's very coordinated, and now he's on this bed, all these tubes and tape, and when they do stuff to your head, they just shave the place where they're dealing. And Marcus always had a big hair, let's call it,
Yeah.
and so he shaved it and shaved in different places, and it was just a very difficult image to take in as the parent. And so I told God, and I prayed to God at that moment, and I spoke with God, and I said, "You know what, God, I dedicated him to you so many years ago. Brought him to the altar, and that is our custom. The way Jesus was dedicated, that is what we did, and we dedicate our children to the Lord. So I dedicated him to you when he was born. He is yours more than he's mine. So if you're going to take him, thank you for waiting for us to get here so that we could send him off." Because it was touch and go for several days. But then I said, "But if you're not going to take him, then I want to know, because I'm going to fight for his life. But I don't want to fight against you." In other words, if it was God's will to take Marcus, I didn't want to fight against God. But if it was God's will to heal him, then I'm definitely going to fight, which is where it kind of leads up to David's prayer, where David says, because what was David? David was a warrior. If David knew anything, he knew how to fight. And he could definitely trigger that warrior in him and go beat these guys up. But he didn't just do that. He prayed. And then is when in chapter 30, God responds to him, and he answered him. And this is verse 8 of chapter 30 of 1 Kings. 1 Kings 30, verse 8. "And he answered him, Pursue, for you shall surely overtake them, and without fail recover all." And so that is the word that I received that very early morning in the ICU room with Marcus. And I told my wife, and we dried our tears. We stopped feeling sorry for ourselves and stopped feeling sorry for Marcus. Marcus doesn't need us to feel sorry for him. What he needs us to do is to believe, is to have faith, is to fight. And that's what we did. And armed with that word, we knew at that moment, though it was going to be difficult, we were going to have the victory.
Okay. Now, back to
Yes.
Marcus. So here we're dealing with your rehab now.
Okay, so yeah, it was 6 weeks in Atlanta. So at that point, I couldn't walk by myself, and I barely started talking. I couldn't.
You couldn't eat.
I couldn't eat, and I couldn't. I could drink, but nothing like too solid. Not like ice. I couldn't have ice. Or
It had to be thick, right? So you were.
I forgot.
Yeah, so he was choking on water. And
Okay.
so that was one of the goals, to get Marcus to be able to drink water, because one of his one side of the vocal cords, right, were paralyzed. And so it was paralyzed
left side,
open.
yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, so the vocal cords, they do this to talk and to do anything.
To make the sound.
Mhm.
Yeah, and the resting is this. So, I guess left side, it was like this. So, they were, and because it's like this, that means also mucus
Right.
comes up, because your vocal cords also stop mucus from coming up. So I had a lot of that. So I coughed up a lot of mucus, or it was very weird. I just had mucus in my mouth. So I had to use a little suction thing to take it out for a while. But so initially, they did an exam and they said the vocal cord was paralyzed. But then once I got to the rehab, they did it again, and the guy said, "Oh no, it's getting better. It's not paralyzed. It's gonna get better." So at that point, we knew that the fact that I was talking was getting better, because it was paralyzed. Would never be able to talk again. So the fact that I was talking again was a good sign to mean that I could eventually eat and drink everything again. So that's what we were focusing on for at least the speech therapy. And then we had physical therapy, so that's walking and doing stuff physically, at least, right? So the focus again was walking. So I was on a wheelchair at that point, doing everything by wheelchair, and I would go to the gym, and they would do like, they would have me stand up and like hold something, while I would just like do, I don't know, side steps, or they would hold my hands as I would walk over stuff. Even one time they had me on like a robot machine thing. They put me in it to just walk with myself, just to get my brain back into walking, so I would know that feeling. My legs would know that feeling again. So we did that for 6 weeks, and it got better, but I was still in a wheelchair at that point by the end of 6 weeks.
Yeah.
And then after that, we went to outpatient therapy, which was where they released me to go back home, to come back here. And
You finish up your therapy here in San Antonio?
so we finished it up here. So that, I think, was just another couple of weeks. And yeah, it's a couple of weeks. It's like October, November.
It's a couple of months.
Was it? Okay.
Yeah. Because he put it as a goal for himself to no longer use any assistance. So he went from a wheelchair to a walker, from the walker to a cane, and the cane to nothing. And so I remember, I think it was February of that next year now, where he says, February 1st, I'm not using a cane any longer. And we kind of looked at him sideways.
That was my New Year's resolution. Yeah.
And what year was this? This was in 2020?
22.
22.
So the injury happened in 21, and so now, so the end of 2021
Okay.
of July, right?
So, and they were able to fix all of the veins in your head. They're all totally.
Yeah. So I think they told me there was nothing to fix. They just had to stop it.
Right.
Because it was just, once it happened, it happened. It's not gonna happen again. So the veins just burst, and that was it. Okay, there's nothing to fix. You know what I mean?
So they can't connect them the way they're supposed
Yeah,
to be.
I think there was other parts.
Right, because they're the smallest veins, so they're the capillaries that burst.
Oh,
So
yeah.
part of the AVM is that it goes from a larger size vein, and then it reduces immediately to a capillary type size. So on a normal process of the vein, it would shrink and shrink and shrink and shrink. But in his, it went from a regular size vein to the capillary too quickly. So that way the capillary cannot handle the pressure that a larger vein can. And then that's why the pressure was a problem. And then it burst because it was just too much pressure at that time.
You know, it's interesting. They're finding more and more about your brain stem,
Yeah.
and like, for example, my veins or whatever, they're twisted a little bit. And the only reason I know that is because, I stop breathing when I'm sleeping.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, my wife would tell me, "Hey, you stopped breathing last night." Yeah, I'm still breathing. I'm fine. You know, I would make jokes about it, tease her. You know, and finally one time I woke up like that. And I better go see somebody. And sure enough, I stopped breathing. So now I have a special, not just a regular CPAP, but if I stop breathing, it pushes air harder, so it starts me breathing again.
Yeah.
So it's all because of the veins or whatever is twisted in my brain stem. So I guess it's a lot of newer technology they're finding out about this stuff. So,
and thank God, because one of the procedures they had to do on Marcus, they went in through the vein in his leg, you know, to get all the way up to the brain, to do whatever they were going to do, you know. So we thank God for technology and for modern medicine, because this all happened while we were on the plane to Atlanta, and we landed in Atlanta, and we're calling for updates, and we were able to speak to the surgeon and to the different specialists that worked on Marcus, and they, you know, they were very nice, but they said, we've done everything we can, now we wait.
So you're all healed, you're all together, you're all good. Exercising, lifting weights, playing sports.
Trying to get back into it,
Trying to get back into it, okay.
It's a little difficult because he's still got a little balance issues. I gotta get used to doing that stuff again.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. When I was, you and I talked, when I was 17 and I had this grand mal seizure and I had no idea. Of course, I was kind of in a way where I didn't grow up in the church, so I didn't have a pastor father from childhood to really learn all this stuff from. I was kind of jumped in a year before, and so when it happened to me, I felt like, because I was very athletic, I was on the football team, I was a pitcher in baseball, I was everything, and all of a sudden I felt like I'd have this seizure just at a moment's notice. I felt like I was a freak of nature. Seriously, it was. I'd be sitting in Sunday school at church, and I could feel it coming on. I'd go walk out to the grass, lay on the ground, and sure enough, I'd do the worm, you know, or whatever you want. You know, and after it was all done, I did, you know, all drool all over, and I'd walk back in, but I was like wiped out for the rest of the day or two, and I basically started getting upset with God, you know. And I don't know how you experienced your own emotions, but for me, it's like, why, God? Why did you do this? Why did you allow this to happen? I asked my pastor, and he says, well, it's not his perfect will, it's his permissive will. I go, that's a bunch of garbage. Give me an answer. Nobody had an answer. And it wasn't until I went, how did you deal with that?
I know once I woke up, it was very, I think, convincing that it was, God has my life in his hands. So I was like, okay, I could have died, but I didn't, so I'm alive. So of course I had the why, but then after why, I thought to myself, well then, what now? Am I gonna keep going away from God, who has my life in his hands, or turn to him? And it was very, like, fight or flight kind of idea. So I didn't really think about it emotionally. I just thought about it like on a survival basis. Like, if I'm gonna live, then I might as well live for God now. And so that's what I internalized for these, past 2 years. And I've just been really focused on that. And it's kind of about now. Well, now that I've graduated and I'm just leaving home, now I do ponder those questions more often of why. And just because I don't, I guess it's because when I look physically at things, it doesn't seem to go where how much strides I've taken spiritually. That I've now I ask God, well, if these whole 2 years were just to get me over here spiritually, then what about me physically? Now, what am I supposed to do? And I guess that's what I'm figuring out now.
Right.
And that, I think, is the key.
Mm-hmm.
What happened to me is, unfortunately, I finally went to a chaplain, and I asked him, I says, why did God do this? And he simply said, I don't know. And he started to cry. He took off his glasses. He goes, I have a daughter. She's 27 years old, and she's mentally retarded. And she lives in a convalescent hospital, and I don't know why. Oh, I mean, all of me just broke down.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, with my situation, they're giving me these drugs that are barbiturates, and they gave me so much and so many different kinds that it made me manic depressant, or now they call it bipolar. So I was that bipolar for like 12 years. And I couldn't make decisions. But I understood something that this chaplain wrote in a book. He says, you don't ask why. Because why puts God into creating good and evil. Ask how. How can you use me now with what I have to reach people and to honor you?
Yeah.
So now that I'm off all those barbiturates and I'm clear-headed,
Yeah.
it's a lot easier to make decisions,
Yeah.
But I started to learn that because of what has happened to me, and because of what has happened to you, you can take what God has been with you in all of this, and you can say, okay, Lord, where do you want me? How do you want me to honor you with a testimony that reaches others? Right. And that's where I'm at, and I've passed that now. I use that. When I was younger, I was too embarrassed to say I have a seizure disorder, but now it's not a big deal because I want God to be honored. And there's a lot of people that go through these things, and they don't know what to say or what to do or how to think.
Yeah.
But I was not as fortunate as you as having parents to train me in biblical understanding.
Yeah.
You had that. You have that much more than I ever did. You're much further along.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess before the injury, I took it for granted. But I don't say not all the time. Because when I went to college, I wrote, I wrote it to someone else. It's funny because we we're a Church of God. And so, growing up in church, there are things that you just do, like you're just loud, like we say, you're just loud, and you're colorful or whatever, and in your speech and in your walk. And so when I went to college, I was 18, and I was on fire. And I have an older cousin, the actual son of the pastor that we went to. He was my guy, my North Star. So I looked at him, and I still do. And he was crazy, and he was awesome. He's funny, and his personality is just funny. He just likes being funny. He likes moving, dancing, getting people to laugh, and so do I. And so I would look to him. I was like, okay, I want to be like him. And so I went to school, and I saw my friends, or making friends. Once they got to know me, they got to know how crazy I really was. Personally, in a relationship level, and then I think I decided, like a year into college, that I was gonna show them how Church of God I was, and so what I do, speaking in tongues out loud, jumping when no one else was jumping, and dancing and moving. What I did not do, which others did, because I don't know, I was like, it was weird. It still is weird to me, but the running around that we do, Church of God will do, it's great. I like it, but it was never my cup of tea, I guess.
Right.
But there's one time a friend of mine that's also Church of God. We had a worship night, and she did it. But I guess it was great. It was cool. But then I don't know. I guess that's the problem. I was watching it, so then it made me kind of weirded out. But then again, stuff like that was not for me. It's for her.
Mm-hmm.
So now for me, whenever I'm worshiping, my eyes are closed the whole time. Praise song, worship song, it's like, I don't care. It's like whatever you do is not for me.
Right.
But what I'm gonna do is between me and God.
Yeah.
And so if you're not closing your eyes and you see me do stuff weird, that's your problem. So that's me now.
You know, let me just interject, and because the why question is hard to not ask.
Oh, I know.
It's a normal response, you know, but now sitting so close but still outside, it didn't happen to me, happened to my son. I really fought the urge to ask why, and again, because I love the word, and one of my favorite scriptures is Romans 8:28, and I figured, okay, this is gonna work, and it's gonna be a blessing, and it's gonna work out for his good. It may not be good, but it's gonna work out. And then I remember that, you know, when Jesus kind of gave his mission statement, you know, he says that why he came was to seek and save the lost. I think that helps us to keep in priority. Nobody wants to live sick. Nobody wants to live poor or outside of whatever the benefits of being Christian. But the main thing is salvation. You know, and if we understand that the main thing is eternal life in Christ Jesus, heaven, forgiveness of sins, I think we don't have to major on the physical things that are here now. You know, say, okay, I'm saved, and it's better to go to heaven with one eye. It's better to go to heaven with one arm than to go to hell with both eyes. You know, so I think for me, again, so close but still not the actual person, helped me. That helped me when, you know, to not focus on, Lord, why him, why my family, why can't it be somebody else? No, Marcus, this worked out for Marcus. God never left us. I don't think or interpret this as a punishment. I don't think that's God. That's not right. The way he is. But when you stay close to God and you seek God, even through the valleys, even through the difficult times, then we can kind of walk into that Romans 8:28.
You know, and I don't think if you have the why question in you, you need to ask it. You need to allow God to answer that for you. Otherwise, it's going to fester in you, I think, if you don't resolve it. I really do think you have to let God resolve that why so that you can get past it. You know, whether it's very minor or major, we have to be honest, and it has to happen. I have a question. Is Lee University a Christian university?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a Church of God affiliated, right? Church of God created that.
Yeah, so it's the Church of God learning institution, university.
So now you went to school, and your plans were to become someone who played music.
Played music, yeah.
So you're a performer. That's it.
Right, yeah.
Okay. But now, since this has happened, everything has changed. Is that correct?
Yeah. Well, of course, physically it's changed to where I am, I guess, mentally slower, I would say. I don't want to say retarded, Like it's the same thing, but like it's really just slower. It's a little bit really, but
Now, well, let's clarify that because it may be just maybe in a response time, so it's not in understanding or in capacity. You know, he's not hindered in intellect.
You don't seem hindered at all.
Exactly.
Not at all. You don't. And
That response is being a little bit hard on himself.
Because I know that what is. I have a relative that is, she's amazing, but she's slower, and you know it. You can tell. You're not that at all. You're not even close.
Okay.
So, and I understand not doing things like you used to. I mean, I'm a testament to that.
Yeah.
I understand that, I can't catch a ball a certain way like I used to, or, things happen. But now what I've read in the story is now you want to teach. Is that correct?
yeah, I think I always had the idea of teaching. Like I knew I was always good at it, but through high school, I was like, I didn't want to be a teacher because I just wanted to perform. The people that I would see online in the videos, they're performers. So I was like, let me just be a performer like them. And so that's what I was striving for. And I think I was doing good. I have a YouTube channel where I post videos I made because I love making stuff and just being myself. That was always me. And I was going to do more of that stuff. But because of the injury, I had to slow down. I couldn't do it as fast anymore. So I had to get it back together. Now I can play saxophone and drum set or other instruments that I did before. I can play them good enough. But I guess now it's like the focus has changed, right? To not solely performing, because I was kind of stubborn in that, and now it's teaching and teaching whatever I can, because I love music, and now I know I love when, I guess just teaching in general is like when you're able to help someone understand or get the idea of like, oh, I can do this because you helped them get it. That's just the best part. That's teaching. You just love teaching. And I love doing that.
So do you right now do any kind of, let's say, home teaching for people who want to learn your saxophone better so you can tutor them?
Yeah. So I've done, well, right now it's, yes, I do that. And it's with mainly music in general.
Mm-hmm.
Because I could focus more on saxophone, on drum set, which is what I play proficiently. But I like, and I think there is a better audience of people who just want to learn music. And I know music because I graduated with music degree, and I love teaching it. And I taught 2 8th graders, and they did not know music at all. And so now, in 4 weeks, 4 lessons, they can play piano and drum set respectively. They can do it. They used to not, and in 4 weeks now they can. And because I helped them do that, now they're church friends of mine. And so now, these past 3 weeks, they would just come up to me. We're friends now. We were never really friends that much, but now they come to me. We talk about music, we talk about school, we talk about stuff. That's awesome, because I love connecting.
Mm.
That's what it is. It's connecting. And teaching and music is a connection. And making music, what I do is I make music so I can connect with people.
Do you find yourself wanting to teach, to say, in a school setting?
That was a thing where I was like, I don't want to do that. So that's why I want to do performance.
Mm-hmm.
But now I look at it and I'm like, maybe I should, because I love teaching. The only thing is that it's a public school, and so I don't know, growing up, and people always tell me, oh, I guess not always, but some people tell me, it's like, it's good, but then the hardships of being a teacher, I'm like, well, they would say, like, it's just sometimes it's not enough. They're like, they don't know what to do. But others, if they just love teaching, they love it. It doesn't matter. So that's why I was like, I don't know.
When I grew up through high school, of course, I gave all my teachers really a bad time. I was terrible. I was the kid that if I didn't want to take a test, I would pull the fire alarm. Seriously, somebody said, "I'll give you $20 if you do it." $20, give it in my hand, and I did it. I mean, I would have teachers if they took somebody's chips away and they had them on their desk. I make a ruckus, so we go up there and sneak them back. I mean,
Oh my
I was
gosh.
I was a teacher's nightmare, literally, and I ended up professionally teaching in school. Of course, my topic, I taught Bible, and in Christian schools they don't always have, if you're teaching Bible, you almost don't have enough classes to teach. So I also taught history. But I learned that it became more of a blessing by touching these kids' lives and connecting with them in such ways that, it's just amazing. I never understood that until I actually started teaching, and I really got talked into it. But later I realized I had the gift of teaching, and it's like, wow, this is amazing. But I loved it, and I loved the response, and I loved the gratification of reaching in and touching kids' lives.
Marcus, hearing this again, it reminds me, Marcus loves the connection. He loves the relationship, and music, and not only music, helps him to make that connection, but the injury and the testimony has enhanced him, to make that connection stronger. And I think this is one of the ways that Romans 8:28 applies to Marcus. It's working out for his good, and it's enhancing his ability to connect with people.
Yeah. Now my wife is, if she watches, and she probably will watch this program, she's going to hate me saying this, but I bought her a keyboard about 7-8 years ago. I want to play. I've always wanted to play when I was a kid. My parents wouldn't let me, and so I bought her one, and she has never taken a lesson.
I know a guy.
So I have your phone number.
Oh my gosh.
And I will give it to her.
That's okay.
And we have that. Then it's a full 88 keys.
Awesome.
Heavy. It's the weighted. I mean, it's like a piano. It's just amazing.
Yeah, let's do it.
So yeah. So, it's interesting. And we talked before the program, and I mentioned we're going to talk about healing. Of course, we don't have a lot of time. We've talked a lot about healing. And I think that when you read through Psalms, David, and in Psalms, there's a lot about healing.
Yeah.
David went through more emotional problem of healing than ever. I mean, of course, a lot of it was his own doing, or most of it was his own doing. But there's a lot of things, and something I mentioned earlier about, I'm somebody who speaks up, okay, and it's, I think it's the teacher in me, but somebody said it's the prophet in me. I says I don't see myself as a prophet, but when people say things that are just not scriptural, and they say it once or 2 or 3 times, I'm like, that's not true. And I'll stand up, and I'm like, oh, everybody's looking at me. And I literally sat in a Bible study where this lady was teaching. She went to, I better not name the church, but she went to a church where about the gifts. They deal with a lot of the gifts. And she would say over and over again that if you don't have faith, God can't heal you. So, and then finally, about the 3rd time, I said, that is absolutely false. It's not scriptural. And she would look at me, what do you mean? And I literally had people in that classroom I knew that she would lay hands on, and if they didn't get healed, she would say, you don't have enough faith, and that's why you're not healed. And I said, well, Jesus walked in Bethesda, I think it was, walked by the pool, Bethesda, and this guy was laying on the mat for X amount of years and couldn't walk. He was lame. And Jesus asked the guy, hey, do you want to be healed? And he didn't say yes. All he said was, I've been here for so long, and I try to get into the pool, and nobody's here to help me. All he did was complain. And what did Jesus do? He said, get up and walk. He healed him without that faith. And I mentioned this earlier in the program, and I think that that's important that we understand that. Healing is a remarkable thing, and it's there. And I've experienced, of course, I take medication, but through all of that medication, 100 years ago, I would have been dead. 80 years ago, I would have been dead if they didn't have what they had. You would have been dead if they did, because of the technology. And I think that healing comes in a lot of different ways. And we may have physical healing, we have emotional healing, we have spiritual healing, mental healing. There's all kinds of stuff there that we can rely on that I think is so important, and the scriptures lend us to that. And when we talk about faith, to me, faith, it's actually, in the Greek, it's actually, pistis is an action word. And if you look at it in English, the very word with a th, faith, makes it action. I don't know if you knew that, but back in the 1500s, it was fe through the Latin, and they added the th to make it, in English, to make it action. And we've added that on. Just like believeth makes it action, believe doesn't. So we have that problem. So the action of obedience in faith helps us understand what happens in healing. And it was interesting how Jesus healed people and would say to them, go sin no more. It's like this, you need to obey. You need to live in obedience. You need to live in holiness. Seek holiness. And I think that's, and Pastor, tell me if I'm wrong, but I think this is a key area that I think we're missing in our world today. This whole idea of seeking holiness. Of course, I'm sure you come from a holiness church.
That's right.
So, and I'm teaching strong in the last 2 months about holiness, whether it's at church, in my classes, or here. And I think it has to do with, why don't we see the power anymore in our world? Well, how much in holiness are we seeking?
That's right.
And I think that's a huge thing. I mean, either one of you, what do you think about that?
Well, about the holiness piece, to understand it better, holiness is not perfection.
Right.
The Bible doesn't say, be ye perfect, for I am perfect. It says, be holy.
Right.
So, and the holiness talks about the separation. We are called, set apart, the church, called apart, separated from everything else. So we should look different. We should be separated. There should be that distinction between believers and non-believers. And so, but then in that piece, the step that requires us to step away from it, I think the Bible says it requires faith, that action. And I love that th. That's great. I'm going to use that. Believeth, because believe tends to be a passive type of thing, but believeth now says, okay, now I have to prove it. So the faith piece is not something that we could just say, I don't need it. The holiness piece, I don't need it. Nothing can separate us from the love of God. We're not negotiating that. But now that we know that, and we have received by grace through faith salvation, we are called to live holy. We're called to live separately, to live apart. We shouldn't look like unbelievers. We shouldn't act like or speak like, live like. We need to be separate. We need to be holy, because that's what we're called. That's a standard that we're called to live by.
Yeah, exactly. And I think holiness is also a cleansing as well. It's a separation and a cleansing, I think. And God created us this way. We were created in His moral image.
Yeah.
And holiness is the center and the essence of God. And I think that, seeking that is primary.
And and now that Jesus has died and risen from the dead, the blood of Jesus plays a role in our life in that cleansing, because we're not perfect.
Sanctification.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
sanctification piece. Yes.
Well, it's been a big pleasure to.
Yeah, it's
And
been great.
I hope this your message gets out there, because I think it's important that people see you, that people see people stand up from where they were, what they went through, and to move forward. And I think in that we can see the power of God, not just because there was healing physically, but because there's a regeneration, a revival, if you will, in the spirit. And I see that in you, and I don't know you that well, but I see that in you, and I think that's what's really amazing. So
That's a witness. That's a testimony
Yeah.
of the power of God right there.
And that's why I said it's not why, it's how can you use me, God? Well,
Yes.
God will use you. This program will go out to many people,
Yeah.
thousands of people. And so your testimony will be out there, and you can share it yourself. And I think that's huge. And
Yeah.
your life will touch, just like I pray that my life will touch many people because of my testimony, the things that have happened, that I don't just squash it, and overlook it. I think that's huge. Thanks for coming on my program. I really
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
You guys are wonderful. You're amazing. You're a thorn in my
Thank you.
side half the time.
I'm doing my job. Thank you, Alan, for having us.
Yeah.
It really has been a pleasure. I was very happy to receive the invitation, and really thank you so much from us, Mark, Burgos, both of us. We're really grateful for you. Thank you, sir.
Okay. So thank you for joining us today. Everyone, you all have a wonderful day, a wonderful week. Aloha.